Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Startup Soirée Podcast. This is your host, Patrick Reif. We are recording on the last days of May. Today's Startup Soirée Podcast guest is Jess Gartner from Allovue. Jess, if you are in the Maryland or the greater Maryland area, has been doing a lot of big things in the startup world, and her company's been getting a lot of traction. So you may be familiar with her name or her company. But we have had her out at a few of the Startup Soirée events and wanted to get her on the podcast so we can find out more. So without further ado, Jess, welcome to the Startup Soirée Podcast.
Thanks, Patrick. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, if you don't mind, why don't you, before we get into the nitty gritty, give everyone kind of like a good idea about you and kind of your background and a little bit about Allovue.
Sure thing. So I actually came into this through the education world. My academic background is in education policy, and then my first career was as a Baltimore City middle school teacher. And I kind of combined my interests in education policy and my work in the classroom when I noticed that my school was seriously resource depleted. We were really lacking basics like books, paper, computers, sort of like the bare essentials for teaching and learning. And that in and of itself is something of note. But what really interested me about it was that there were other schools in our same district that were really resource rich. And so it seemed to me like if one school had one-to-one iPads and another school was missing copy paper, it was really a question not just of like, are there enough dollars, but how are we allocating dollars? And I became totally obsessed with this idea and this question of what does resource allocation look like? And so I started Allovue, hence our name, is the visualization of resource allocation at the school, district, and state level in education organizations. And so this started with sort of an idea in my head of what would happen if we gave principals and district leaders a tool like general consumers have the advantage of using in day-to-day finance, like mint.com or LearnVest, or honestly, even like your basic online banking software, where you can just sort of at a glance look up information, analyze data, track progress to goals in a super visual and accessible way. And so I took that idea and I started Allovue about 2.5 years ago. And we've taken that idea and run with it. And the idea has, I think, of course, expanded and changed a little bit, but the original philosophy and mission and vision of the company is almost identical to the day I started it.
Wow. I have so many spots I could go. So the product is built as a advocacy tool on the part of the administration. Who is your kind of primary target user?
Yeah, great question. So our customer is the school district itself. So we sell to like Baltimore City Schools is one of our customers.
And you find I'm sorry, and you find them to
That's
be
okay.
So are that customer, they're wanting of this solution?
Yeah, I think education professionals tend to get a bad rap about being like stuck in the past or anti-technology, but having worked in education, I can tell you that a lot of that stems from the fact that we give educators the shittiest technology on earth. Like some of this technology was created in like the 80s and it's completely archaic and inefficient.
Green screen Max.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and so when you show them something that looks like it was built in the 21st century, people get really excited about that. And I think the other the other sort of misconception that a lot of education professionals get is that they're trying to hide something or that there's a lot of corruption.
Totally.
Yeah, but in my experience, that is by and large a very, very small minority, and much more common is the fact that people are given enormously complex tasks, and so many enormously complex tasks with incredibly high stakes and a lot of transparency and accountability in terms of whether or not they're successful, but almost no training or tools to do those jobs well in the first place. And so it's just like sort of a perfect storm of setting people up for failure. And I think that when you approach education professionals as professionals, because they are, and as people who are trying to do what's right for kids, and you provide them with solutions and training that equip them to do their job better, people get excited about that, you know? And so we very much see our school district and principal users as partners in this work. And we want to work with them to help them get better at allocating resources. And we think that technology is a small part of that, but we also are very much aware of the limitations of technology. This work does not get done without the people behind the screen. And we see our role in the ecosystem as helping them automate all of the grunt work of mining data so that they can do the work that humans do best, which is applying the nuances of local schools and local systems and making the best decisions for that school or system, using that data as one tool of many. So to get back to your earlier question, we sell to the district because that's where we do the central data connection. So we actually integrate directly with their financial servers. And then the users range from the CFO and the finance department all the way down to the principal and school administrative level. So it ranges actually from district to district, depending on how centralized or decentralized decision-making authority is. But increasingly, especially in large urban school systems, a lot of funding and budgeting control is being pushed down to the school and principal level. So we wanted to make sure that our tool was inclusive of the needs for the school level administrators, as well as someone like the CFO.
Sure. That makes sense. So to qualify my dig deep and to have for having interrupted you a minute ago was kind of exactly what you just said back to me, and maybe I'll look at it in a little bit different light, but kind of what I see is there's always this, you were talking about, interdistrict budgets and why some places are out of, fundamentals while other places soar in terms of kind of like exponentially, not unnecessary, but far greater resources than places that are lacking on the fundamentals and how that gets distributed. And I think that being a Baltimore native, and thinking inside of the psyche or one of the psyches that exists of a Baltimore native, and understanding neighborhood favoritism or whatever those perspectives are that exist inside of like the social mind, and why certain school districts have better resources than other resources. And there's a lot of ambiguity that exists there. A lot of people assume that it's political or that it's favoritism or that it's based on these old lines or these old perspectives about why certain areas get more money than the other, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing is no one ever knows if that's something that is old school ingrained, if it's something that actually doesn't really exist, if it's something that the administration is too fat and happy with the status quo to challenge it, if the administration are actually wanting for a better, more transparent idea how things are being allocated, but they're being put it off by the budgetary perspective. So I think hearing you talk about it, what I saw in it was this ability to help us make more transparent that kind of funding process. And I feel like there's a very big social conversation that is effectively that really kind of will help to demystify a lot of that. It'll make it a more accessible conversation for people who are actually the ones that are the recipients of that service that's being paid for and and systemized and allocated and like all of that stuff. The person at the end user is someone with a child who is going through it, and that child, and for them to not understand it and to have all of this confusion and skepticism and all of that stuff, all of those things systemically will stand in the way of the goal, which is education and progress and like a better understanding and a more functional system. So sorry to railroad that there, but I just
okay.
I got excited when I heard you talk about it, because I started to realize kind of the practical ways that society could benefit from this kind of transparency, and being someone from Baltimore who's really focused on how our city will start to thrive in the future. I think that that's something that Baltimore would probably very certainly benefit from.
Yeah, something that's always so interesting to me is when I see like op-eds about school finance, and it's like there's a lot of things to have an opinion about in education, but this is not one of them. Like, this is an area where there are literal black and white answers that come down to dollars and cents. Like when I see op-eds about like, we think this school gets money, we think this school gets more money, it's like, well, there's an answer to that question. That's a question that can be looked up and verified. And it's not a matter of opinion. But unfortunately, because data is currently so obfuscated, not just to the public, but internally as well, it's hard to find those answers. And that leads people to just sort of draw their own conclusions based on what they see. And as you astutely pointed out, what you observe is not always the whole story. And so this is really about using data to tell a more rich and complete story about what's going on in schools and how those resources are being used, because there's currently a lot of misconceptions.
So fascinating.
I know. Did you ever know that education finance was so endlessly fascinating?
Well, I tell you, I had a hunch that it was pretty fucked up, but like we don't get in the position that we're in without it being like squeaky clean, certainly, and things don't look good. I have children. I live in Baltimore City. My wife is. I have the benefit that my wife is a social social worker in some regards. She's a program director for some programs for Kennedy Krieger, but before that has always been kind of involved in different kind of socially based programs that are helping to benefit people in the greater Baltimore metro area. So I have that in the back of my mind, and I'm at a position where we're surveying all the different resources that are there and figuring out, what our odds are in each one and how we set our kids up to succeed while not at the same time pulling them out of like, the system that we know needs them to be there to get better. Also, like it's a real white knuckle kind of relationship. So, having I speak about the in regards to the relief of having that transparency. Like, that's my point of view from a parent. It's not from somebody who's like in the business world with you or the host of this podcast, but very simply from the perspective of a parent who has 2 young children who are going to be in some way funneled through different school systems in the Baltimore metropolitan area over the next 20 years. And, I know that I need to take a vested interest in it.
Absolutely. Well, as a former teacher, I can tell you that if you're reading to your kids at bedtime, that's like 80% of the battle. So they're probably already ahead of the game.
We crush bedtime. We are like so good, so good. We might read too much.
No, there's no such thing.
So, where are you from?
I'm from New Jersey,
Okay.
Monmouth County, New Jersey.
And what brought you to Maryland?
Teach for America. I joined Teach for America out of college. I was in Philadelphia at the time. And so I moved down here the summer of 2009 as a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed college grad and started teaching here and did my master's at Hopkins and really fell in love with Baltimore and decided to buy a house in Holland's Market and then later start a company here as well. So I think I'm pretty firmly rooted here right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I have a lot of love for Baltimore.
Plus, you can get back to Jersey like hella easy from Maryland.
Yeah. And I actually convinced my mom to move down here too. So my mom lives in Towson now. So I'm just gonna have all of my close friends and family move down here, and then it'll be even more awesome.
Now you're talking. Now you're talking. So tell me about the aha moment when. Don't tell me about that yet. So you're teaching, right? I get that. You're seeing that things are like rampantly fucked, and you're kind of like scratching your head about it, and you come to this idea. But before that, there must have been some kind of entrepreneurial nose tickle or whatever that gave you, like, there had to be a fusion that existed, a second idea that the teaching insight like fused with to bring you to that conclusion. Where's that? Where's that? What is that story?
Yeah, so I think unfortunately it wasn't quite as dramatic as that, and it was really a slow build of a couple things that happened in my life at the same time. For one, as I started putting down roots in Baltimore, I surprisingly sort of found my tribe of people in the tech and entrepreneurial community here. I think because there's a really strong social innovation thread in the tech community here that I really, really, really liked. And so I started hanging out with people who were either highly technical or entrepreneurial. And I started doing things like go to hackathons on weekends and like hang out with a bunch of technologists and designers and just like make stuff. And so that was a super cool experience for me. The idea of seeing a problem and just building a solution to it. It was so concrete. And it was such a diversion from my day-to-day teaching where there was so much that I wanted to fix and like often very little I could do to address it in a short period of time. And so this idea of like, doing this like 48-hour thing on the weekend where you could just like have a solution was really cool. And one of my best friends left the classroom and started a company called Common Curriculum, Scott Messenger. And so for years, I was sort of watching him on that journey, and maybe he rubbed off on me a little bit. And then I did not go straight from the classroom to founding Allovue. I took a very strange detour into the world of venture capital. I had decided I was going to leave the classroom for a variety of reasons and was going to work for a nonprofit, an education nonprofit. And at like the 11th hour, funding fell through for my job. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I own a new house and I'm single and almost broke and now I have no job. And out of the blue, I got offered this marketing position at a venture capital firm, which seemed very far away from where I saw myself in any version of my life, but it sounded also kind of cool. So I was like, well, maybe this is a sign from the universe, and maybe this is a totally different way to interact with the education world because they had an education vertical in their portfolio. So I took the job, and I think that job just gave me some much needed time to process my teaching experience, because teaching is just like there is no processing time. It's just a constant like 18, 20-hour day with like a barrage of things being thrown at you. Not unlike entrepreneurship, actually. In fact, a lot harder in most ways. And so I sort of just had some time to process. And I also think that the culture shock of moving from a completely like resource depleted public school environment to the just resource mecca of the world of venture capital and this world of like people who are highly efficient at their jobs sort of made my brain explode. And it was like the big bang in my brain, and this little mustard seed of Allovue was born in that process. And even then, even after I had the idea, my first impulse was to like go get a PhD and study this problem. It was not like I should start a company. That was actually the farthest thing from my mind. And it took me several months of basically convincing myself that the only way this was going to get done is if I did it through some sort of private company endeavor where I could get private funding and move really quickly. And this just terrified me. I mean, I had absolutely no business starting this company. I had no business background, I had no finance background, and I had no engineering background. So this is like the most absurd proposition that I'm going to start an enterprise finance technology company. And I would sit in my room at night and basically do visualization exercises, like back when I used to play sports, you know, like you visualize the goal, you visualize the strike. And I would visualize what this would look like if somehow I was successful. And I did this for months. And then finally I was like, you know what? Okay, what is the worst that could happen? And I decided that the worst thing that could happen was that I would go bankrupt and I would fail so catastrophically that I would bring shame to my family and I would have to leave the country. And then I decided I would take like my last shred of credit and buy a one-way ticket and to some tropical island and like open a waffle stand on a beach. That was like my like D-Day plan. And I was like, you know what? That actually does not sound that bad. That actually sounds like it might be okay. And I think a lot of times people psych themselves out about this like unknown worst case scenario. But when you name it, like when you actually go through thinking like, what is the worst case scenario here? It's never as bad as the idea of a worst case scenario. The actual worst case scenario is somehow a lot less threatening.
It's like the scary part is settling, not so much whatever the consequence is once you settle.
Exactly. So once I had that realization, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And in like a matter of weeks, I had quit my job and just sort of jumped into this big blue dark ocean.
But the ocean is blue and not red.
The ocean is blue, yeah, for now.
When was that?
That was January, February of 2013.
All right. So a little over 2 years now.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. You're
Thank
here.
you.
You're here.
I am still here. Yeah.
Whenever
people ask me how it's going, I'm like, we live to see another day. That's, you know.
So how big has your team grown?
There's 8 of us now.
And you said you are headquartered in Mount Vernon?
Yep. We actually have a really cool office above Brewer's Art.
That makes happy hour much more convenient.
I know, except we do not get to happy hour nearly as much as we should.
You guys need to invest in some growlers. Yes. That would be a capital idea. Boy, I feel like there's so many questions that I could ask, and we try and keep this like somewhat short. And what I want to at least say is that last week on the podcast we had Stacy Chambers from Go-Go's Retread Threads. Do you know that?
Yeah,
That company, that bus.
Absolutely, they're at the farmers market.
Beautiful psychedelic time machine. I was talking with her on the podcast interview, and we got into this great, vibe out question that ended up being really about wanting to find privatized, non-gentrified, gentrification-driven ways to take back like hunks of our city. Like, how do we do that? Like, what is that model that's based in benefit for like citizenry, and what is that model that's based in like sustainability but not necessarily profitability for whether it would be renovating whole blocks and making sure that we're moving the people that are from those neighborhoods into those homes, and like figuring out other ways to affect infrastructure, because like all of the surface efforts aren't going to mean anything, and if we don't spend 20 and 40 and 60 years figuring out how to change the infrastructure of the bedrock of the community, and how the services are meted out and how they take effect and how they help people, and making sure that the services being helpful to people is the number one priority that everything else kind of surrounds. And she was totally like right on board. She was talking about kind of her business model and ways that it could serve other services inside of these deserts. Whether she's like, the big conversation is about food deserts, which is very true, but at the same time, like the places that are food deserts, like it's not just hard to find food there. Like it's hard to find anything except for like anything that a corner store like carry out has in it. You know what I mean? It's not like it's just hard to get good groceries in these places where there aren't grocery stores anymore. Like you can't get anything there because there's no infrastructure whatsoever. So
yeah,
I just wanted to mention that because I feel like there's a space. Maybe at some point, I keep saying on this podcast that I'm trying to find all of the people out there who are interested in like the space where entrepreneurship and like civic and social ideas are coming together in terms of where it actually meets the people, like, and that we have to have like a great panel discussion with all of those people that are focused on producing these new models for taking back the stuff.
Yeah, in general, I think I've come to the conclusion that in a lot of cases, your best way of changing the system is working outside of it, which is somewhat of a depressing conclusion, but I think that's very much how I felt about education. I mean, coming to Baltimore out of college, I was like the most bleeding heart public service liberal. The fact that I'm running a company is like, I think my parents are still shaking their heads confused about it. And to me, it came down to this issue of like, how can I get things done fast and well?
Totally.
And I was not seeing that working in the system. I really felt like I had to go outside the system and just sort of strip away all of the bureaucracy and the red tape from my life and like hack away at this problem. And if and when I found the solution, bring it back to the system and be like, how about this? And I really think that was the right thing for this, for sure. I mean, I remember one of our first meetings with the district, they were like, we showed them our product and they were like, we've been trying to build this internally for like 5 years. And they keep telling me we need like $10 million. And I was like, well, we did it in less than 2 years, and it's not going to cost you $10 million.
There you go.
Um,
Boom.
So, yeah, I think sometimes you just have to sort of, it kind of goes hand in hand with like the ask for forgiveness, not permission mantra of like, you just got to go try stuff and do stuff and experiment. And when you hit on something that works, then try to bring it into the system. I actually don't think it's an accident that at least 2 of the biggest and fastest growing companies right now are technically illegal. So both Uber and Airbnb are constantly embroiled in legal battles because they've created this system outside the system that is now upending the system. And you can't create that kind of change from within these deeply entrenched institutions. You oftentimes just have to go hack away at them outside and then bring them back in and kind of upend things from the outside.
You got to reimagine it.
Yeah.
You have to reimagine it. I have about 4 billion times in my life said that the salvation that cities, particularly cities like Baltimore, but I really believe just in general the infrastructure that matters, that it's gonna come from not just the private sector, because I don't necessarily believe in the big old guard companies coming in to provide these kind of services, because I think that they are insidious and will be guilty of enacting the same awful shit that is in place now. But more specifically, I think that it's going to come at the hand of entrepreneurs for 2 reasons. One, I think that they're going to look at the problems at a different way, and they're going to innovate towards the solutions as opposed to modifying the old solutions. They're going to innovate to really look at what the need is and how that need gets answered. But even more so, I think that they're going to see communities like Baltimore. I think that people like yourself and myself are going to recognize, I already do, and it sounds like you do too, but I'm using us as examples. But I think that, we recognize the value that the landscape of Baltimore has provided us. Like, it is an ideal place for us to be doing what we're doing. And I am elated to be able to pay it forward and put that energy back into making this city like a great space. And I for sure don't think that I would want to ever entrust someone else to carry that vision out. Like, as far as I'm concerned, it's going to be all about you and me and all the other people that we're going to meet and foment this conversation about how we, slowly but surely have impact in a fundamental and like legitimate way that slowly trends up, and it'll just sweep up and replace the old system because it'll be obvious.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is so good. I'm having a blast. Okay, so we'll just do follow-up number 2. We will podcast again, Jess. Before we go, tell everyone kind of the best spots to check out Allovue, be in touch with you, where you like to chat with people if you prefer to get tweets or emails or whatever, and
Sure.
We'll link up to all that stuff in the show notes too.
Yeah, you can find information about the company at allovue.com, ALLOVUE, and our Twitter is Allovue Balance, and I'm on Twitter at Jess Gartner.
Okay. Succinct. Okay, guys, so that wraps this one up. I hope that people are subscribing and getting this jam in their updates every Monday morning. We're going to do some new publications on the podcast soon. We're going to add a audio blog version of some of the posts that we're putting up on the blog, the content we're writing every week. You're going to have me narrating Jess Gignak's blog post, so that should be exciting and strange at the same time. But please head over to iTunes, leave us a review, let us know what you think so other people can find this podcast. And yeah, I think that's it. I don't know. That's it. Start tweeting at us. Start asking us questions. Ask us questions to ask other people. Okay, that's it. All right, guys. Until next week. Peace.